No, I'm seeking companionship. Yeah, connection.
Okay, understood.
Right.
It's not honorable or respectable, but I did get into, but it was, at that time I was young, it was beautiful. I was like, oh, right, I'm special, I can do this. And then, people beat on you. They take all your money. You don't have anything in your body. You learn to love him, this big man upstairs.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
On today's video, prostitution has hit levels in Florida that I've never seen before. Whether you're just driving around any city in Florida at night or you're simply watching the news, it seems to be a huge topic in the state of Florida. And in fact, if you're driving around cities late at night, it's almost guaranteed in a lot of these cities in Florida like Miami, Bradenton, Tampa, Jacksonville, that you're unavoidably going to see this situation right here. The state of Florida has 100,000 people that are homeless, and that means that there's a lot of people out there that are completely vulnerable, and many times they resort to doing anything to subsidize their food or, of course, their habits, most likely their habits. The overdose death rate in Florida is 1.4 times higher than the state of California. So that should just give you an idea how many people in Florida are addicted and resorting to the streets to make their ends meet. Unfortunately, a large percentage of these females who find themselves in this situation are also homeless. It would be hard to really put a figure on what percentage of women in this situation are homeless, but I would have to say possibly 40 to 60% of the women who are in this situation are currently homeless. And the ones that are not homeless are most likely being trafficked and exploited on an international level. These are people who are brought to the United States under a student visa with the notion that they're coming here to work on paper, but in reality, they're coming here for a secondary purpose. So in today's video, I want to be showing you guys some recent arrests in Florida that confirm what the situation is on the streets here. Perhaps the most notable case is out of Polk County, Florida, where 21 individuals were arrested at Asian massage parlors. Now, this has been happening in Florida for decades, and I guess they needed a news story to match their narrative, and they went for the easiest target because, as far as I know, in the state of Florida, I can't think of a single Asian massage parlor that is actually not doing exactly this. So it isn't a surprise that they were making 21 arrests in Polk County. When I lived in North Naples, there's this Asian massage place that has been open for years. Despite that, they only have 6 reviews on Google. And living within walking distance to this place, I figured out exactly what was going on there. And they're still open. They've been open for years now. So this isn't really a news story. It might be a news story to somebody who isn't familiar with Florida. But if you live in Florida and you're familiar with the streets, you know that these Asian massage places are 80 to 90% of the time nothing more than a house of ill fame, where plumbers with bad breath crawl to in the rain to find some old, nasty Asian women. So I don't know why people think this is a news story, because after all, the overwhelming majority of these Asian massage places are nothing more than, well, that. I find it hypocritical with as many people that are actually being trafficked in the state of Florida, as many real victims that are vulnerable out there. Out of the people that I've interviewed on my YouTube channel, I can't tell you the background details on people because I give them dignity and respect, but you wouldn't believe how many of the people that I interview that are homeless on the streets are in this exact situation right now. And again, I give everybody dignity and respect that they deserve for the interviews, but the background details of what people are living in real life on these streets of Florida is absolutely atrocious. These old Asian women, that's their profession. They know what they're doing, and 90% of the time, they're not even born in this country. So the fact that instead of going after the real victims in this situation and helping people in the United States that are from here, that are in vulnerable situations and are being harmed, no, let's just focus on, what makes a good headline. So for these sheriff's offices in Florida going after Asian massage parlors, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. It does nothing. Here's one from Hernando County, old Asian women, big deal. How a guy can pay to be with an 64-year-old woman is beyond me. Meet Miss Lee. She's from Palm Beach County, Florida, and despite the fact she looks kind of old and raggedy, she's like new because it's only her first time being arrested for prostitution. Notice they have to list it's her first time because most of the women doing this are arrested time and time again for doing the same old thing, to where even if it's your first charge, they have to denote that it's the first time, because most of the time it's not their first time. I'd be willing to bet anything that this is a female who needs help. She has a horrible addiction that has driven her to do just about anything to keep it going. These are the types of people that need real help. They need psychological treatment. They need therapists, and the government needs to be the one paying for this, because these individuals are indigent, homeless, and addicted. The state of Florida really needs to step up mental care. There are people like her on the streets that need therapy, and these resources simply do not exist. The state of Florida needs to help people like that have proper mental health help, so that they don't end up in these vulnerable situations. And you might think, well, these people chose that lifestyle, they got themselves into it. When your 17, 18-year-old daughter gets a new boyfriend, he gets her hooked on substances and starts working her, that's when you realize that perhaps there's more to it than that. A lot of people are not sentimental to the people on the streets that need mental help. They need psychological treatment. They need help. They need real help to get them out of these situations. Arresting these females does absolutely nothing for them or for society. They need mental help. The state of Florida does not offer mental help to these people. Sure, when they make news conferences and press conferences, they do that. But the only reason they do that is because they're in front of a camera. If they're not in front of a camera, this is just another dog getting picked up and sent to the dog pound. And again, you might not think anything of these people that are in this situation until it's your daughter who is in that situation. Until it's somebody that you grew up with, one of your friends that's in this situation, is when you might start to worry about what's happening to these people. But if you're not related to these people, you don't know who they are, most people in society could care less. But they don't realize that the overwhelming majority of the women that are out there are being exploited by somebody. I have literally interviewed people, and as soon as I give them the money for the interview, somebody immediately comes and takes the money. Right there on the left, it's just past the woman in front of that building. So it's very prevalent in Florida. It's just normal. It's everywhere you look in Florida these days. Look right here. Here's another one standing in front of this business right here. This is the situation in Florida. This is the reality on the streets of Florida right now. Take a look at this piece of crap. He was arrested for bringing a woman from New York to Florida, telling her she had a job at a spa. When she showed up, he threatened her and told her that this is what she was going to do now. And finally, the woman finally found the courage to turn him in, but his plans were to use her. And he threatened that if she did anything to denounce him, that she would end up getting deported over it. So they prey on people who are, again, weak and vulnerable. And while there are a lot of people with student visas or who are illegal that are in this situation, the easiest victim is somebody who's from here, who has an addiction, and is rapidly trying to sustain something that isn't possible. Meet Lisa Marie from Palm Beach County. Who on earth would pay to... I can't even imagine. She was arrested for prostitution. And it's not her first time. It's her third or subsequent time being arrested for this. So this is like buying a car that's ugly and used. It's like a Pontiac Aztek with 400,000 miles. Now this one's a male, but the arrest report didn't say soliciting. It said prostitution. So there's that for the ladies out there. Okay. This young man is on the streets of Palm Beach County, and it says offer. It doesn't say solicit. So he's out there offering this. This one's 34 years old, out of Polk County, Florida. Imagine a 34 years old having to do that for a living. That's horrible. My guess is she's probably Dominican, and she does this as an occupation. Maybe somebody brought her here just for that purpose. Here's a 62-year-old vehicle with 400,000 miles. This one is out of Hernando County, Florida. That's Spring Hill, Florida, just north of Tampa. Now, she was running a house of ill fame, and, well, it should be called, at this point, a nursing home if they're in their 60s. I think if they're over 65 years old, they need to call it a nursing home of ill fame. In fact, I think this one right here is possibly the only young lady I found. I think she was out of Palm Beach County, and at least she's not in her 60s. Here's another one out of Palm Beach County. I wouldn't let this lady get in my car even if she was an Uber passenger. Just yesterday, the news over there in Jacksonville, Florida, made a report about how prevalent the situation is in the Arlington area of town, and how they think that building more luxury apartments might make the situation go away. You'd be surprised to know that these new luxury apartments are getting filled with Colombians, Ukrainians, Brazilians, If anything, it's just stepped it up to a more sophisticated, harder to detect level, because after all, the ones that are on the streets, they're visible because they're outside of motels and on street corners. But the ones that are coming from Colombia, Brazil, Ukraine, and Russia are a little bit more sophisticated, and they're coming here with quote-unquote student visas. Tell me how on earth law enforcement's ever going to be able to decipher that one. I mean, these law enforcement agencies are getting outsmarted by Lisa the Crack Rock. The moment they turn their backs on Lisa, she throws the rock away. So if they can't catch Lisa Crack Rock, what makes you think they're going to keep up with these more sophisticated networks? The way things are looking in Florida, law enforcement is going to wish they could go back to the days of illegal immigrants, because things are getting very complicated. With these pretext of student visas, people that are coming over here in what legitimately seems like they're students when they're really not. On top of that, keep in mind that these networks like the Russians, Ukrainians are more sophisticated. They're having less customers. They're only working with very high-end clientele. They're having less dates. They're making a lot more money. And of course, because there's so much more money involved, it looks like a normal situation when it really isn't. This is really getting out of control here in Sarasota where I live. I think in this area, there's more of these high-end type people than there are people literally working the streets. And the crazy thing about it is this isn't trackable. They're not getting arrested. This isn't showing up on the front news. This is something very well concealed, and it happens, but completely covertly to where we're never going to know the scale of it. But these high-end women, they're pitching at very high dollar clienteles, girls from Brazil and Ukraine and stuff like that. This isn't just something that is detectable, stoppable. These are very elaborate, very sophisticated schemes that have a very good possibility of never being discovered. So like I said, if these networks continue to come to the United States, law enforcement is going to wish they could go back to the days of illegal people that at least you had the hope could get deported, because these people are very sophisticated, very difficult to track. It is literally becoming more difficult than ever. There was a time when immigration in the United States was simpler. Today it's got so complicated, but the criminals are always 2 steps ahead of the law. Now in Florida, they're cracking down on immigration allegedly. Well, what are they doing about the student visa thing that's going on? It's really bad, and most people are too stupid to even notice it. And that's why a lot of people right now are all wound up about, we're going to stop these illegal paper prints down here coming here to cut my lawn. I'm going to cut my own dang lawn now. Okay, well, here's a new stream that's coming in that is more undetectable, more financially lucrative, and almost unstoppable. I mean, how do you stop somebody here allegedly on a student visa that is only meeting a few people here and there for thousands of dollars? Very high dollar clientele. It's definitely not something you're going to see on the front news with an arrest. It's very covert, literally impossible to stop. So just so you know, there's another level of sophistication with this problem that is very undetectable. And the ones that we're stopping are literally just the street dealers, the people on the streets that are all strung out. And that's part of the problem, but it isn't really the big picture. And it's sad to say, with these high-end services going around, I don't think the sheriff's office needs their little massage parlors anymore. They're getting old. Because did I forget to mention that law enforcement officers are among the top clients of these Asian massage parlors? Yeah, there's even been situations where law enforcement officers have been on the other end of the sting trying to extort free services for their cooperation. That's a thing too. Pasco County, Florida. We heard stories on the streets about police officers who purposely arrest these females that are in the situation, and they don't exactly need a bondsman if they want to make these charges go away. There's a recent news story here in Florida where a police officer was actually caught trying to extort people that were going to get arrested as well. So that's not unheard of, and that's always happened, not just here in Florida, but globally. That's a problem endemic to law enforcement globally. A very angry-looking woman, T, out of Palm Beach County. She was offering services and running a house of ill fame. I think at this point the entire county of Palm Beach is a county of ill fame. Has anybody considered that if these women are constantly and consequently getting arrested time and time again for the same thing, that arresting them doesn't really seem to make much of a difference? We'll take this young lady out of Palm Beach County. It was allegedly her first time going down for this offense. Her bail is only $250. It seems like a slap on the wrist to somebody that will be out there again in no time. Without a doubt, it is almost impossible to eradicate one of the oldest professions on earth. It's impossible to prevent it all from happening. Women and a few zesty guys are always going to be out there trying to garnish attention in the streets at night. And of course, for these women, I always understood that the worst part was the physical contact of having to engage with somebody you don't like. But after talking to many of them for our YouTube channel through interviews and talking to other people that I've interviewed who didn't mention they did this on camera, but off camera we talked about the problem. You know, the hardest part isn't so much the physical contact. That's the way a male would perceive it. But, you know, for women, it's actually the lack of respect from other women, as other women don't seem to have a lot of respect for women that just give up the goodies like that. And then these women are mostly not attractive looking. They're not young. They're homeless, so their hygiene can't be the best. I mean, I can't even imagine what type of guy is so animalistic that this is the way he views a woman. It's nothing that I could understand. And on the other aspect of it, you know, from the female perspective, I always thought that it was the physical contact that was the worst part, but really it's the social aspect of how people view you for being in that situation. It's kind of and it's crazy to think that for those women, it isn't even their internal, the way it affects them internally, the way it affects their emotions. It's the way it's perceived by other people. And I never really got that aspect of it. But again, they're more worried about their exterior appearance than they are about their own commitment. So it's a very bad situation for anybody to be in. And it's more prevalent in Florida than other places because addiction here is out of control. Like I said earlier in the video, the overdose death rate in Florida is 1.4 times higher than California. It's higher than Oregon, higher than Washington. So when your state is among those states that have the most addiction, and it's a state that has no income tax, so there are not very many services available to people. When you have people with no help, no services, and they're addicted on top of that, and then they're economically deprived in a state where cost of living continues to grow but incomes don't, what do you think is going to happen to people that are vulnerable? They're going to be propense to being exploited. So as life in Florida continues to get more expensive, more difficult, it leaves people in an even more vulnerable situation. And keep in mind, in a state where mental help is not available, it's definitely happening in Florida at a much higher rate than in other states. So yes, this is a problem that's almost impossible to stop. Yes, this problem has always existed, but there's a few specific contributing factors to the economical realm of Florida and the social services available to people that make the state of Florida even more propense than other states. You know, I recently went to Los Angeles, California, and I was on the famous Figueroa Street, and me and my wife were driving around, like we couldn't believe how prevalent this is in Los Angeles. But then coming to the realization that we have the same exact problem here in Florida. It's absolutely no different than California. And sometimes our perception by the media can be kind of misleading to think that this is a problem somewhere else. It's time for people in Florida to wake up to the reality that human trafficking in our state has become an absolute crisis, with places like Tampa being the absolute epicenter of human trafficking. And if you think the situation in other places is bad, you simply are not familiar enough to what's happening in Florida. And of course, this is what's not happening behind closed doors. This is what's out in the open. You wouldn't believe how prevalent this problem really is. And even if you live in a community like Naples, Sarasota, or Palm Beach County, where it looks all glittery and beautiful and suburban, you have no idea how prevalent the situation is. The state of Florida has become a very dangerous place to be a vulnerable person. And while it's easy for law enforcement to shut down an Asian massage parlor that's been doing this for decades and everybody in town knows what it's about, it's a little bit harder to find the women that are vulnerable and giving them help and assistance to help them not end up in that situation again. But it's even more difficult now with all these student visas, the people coming from Ukraine, Brazil, Dominican Republic, to do the same exact thing on a more sophisticated and discreet level. When we start to see busts of those kind, then I'll take my hat off for law enforcement.